Sylvan Watchers, the brand new faction, Storm's Raid. This is going to be huge. It's breathtaking, and I'm excited to dive into every single champion with you all. Let's take a look at their kits. Let's look at the aesthetics of the champions. Hey, let's get right into it. What's going on, team? It's your boy MurderInc here, back with another Raid Shadow Legends video. It's here. The second to last of the known factions, I guess we can say, has finally hit Raid. We are talking about the Sylvan Watchers faction. Definitely an upgrade over their placeholder name. So let's dive into the champion, take a look at their kits, animations, and see how good this new faction is. So the first champion we have is Elva, Autumnborn, legendary support-based champion. Base stats, respectable, 1300 defense, 19,000, just under 20,000 HP, 110 base speed, you love to see it. Aesthetics, hey, they killed it. They killed it. We already know how good Raid is. She looks really, really good. So moving on to the A1, attacks one enemy, placing a 15% continuous heal buff for 2 turns on the ally with the lowest HP. We've seen this before. A2, 75% chance of removing all debuffs from all allies, places block debuffs and 30% increased speed buff on all allies for 2 turns. This goes up to 100% chance and a 3-turn cooldown once fully booked. Moving on to the A3, revives a target ally with 40% HP and 15% turn meter, then places increased defense and increased attack on that ally for 2 turns. Not the best single target revive. It is what it is, 3-turn cooldown. Not much to protect the champion once they are revived. That's kind of a point that I don't like for sure. Move on to the passive here. Leaf Shroud heals each ally by 10% of their max HP at the start of their turn, placing a perfect veil buff for 1 turn on the ally with the lowest HP at the end of this champion's turn. So pretty interesting synergy there. We do have an aura of increases ally speed in all battles by 19%. So this is looking like a pretty average support if you take a group of all these supports from everywhere else in the game and compare it to this one. Nothing crazy stands out for sure, but I definitely wouldn't say it's one of the worst champions that we could have gotten. The next champion we do have is going to be King Gallcobar, another legendary support-based champion, magic affinity, looking great, fitting the aesthetic of these Sylvan Watchers for sure. We have almost 21,000 base HP, just under 1300 base defense, 108 speed. That's the key to look at for sure here. Let's go over his skills. We have an A1 ability, Tangle Staff, attacks one enemy, placing a shield buff on the target for 2 turns with the lowest HP. The value of the shield is equal to 15% of the ally's max HP, damage based on attack. A lot of supports do typically have their damage based on attack. Next one, we have Vitriolic Thorns, a very good skill naming for sure. Attacks all enemies, has an 80% chance of removing all buffs, places a 5% poison debuff for 2 turns on each enemy for every buff removed from them. Pretty cool. Also has an 80% chance of placing a block buffs debuffs on all enemies for 1 turn. This of course goes to 100% once fully booked and a 3-turn cooldown. So right away this kind of reminds you of Hydra for sure, with removing the buffs, placing block buffs even though it is only for 1 turn, and of course poisons will do a decent bit of damage but nothing crazy. Next we have Hypertrophy. On this A3 ability here, removes all debuffs from all allies, placing a 15% continuous heal buff for 1 turn on each ally for every debuff removed from them, so it's kind of swapping debuffs for a heal. Also places a shield buff on all allies for 2 turns. The value of the shield is equal to 25% of this champion's max HP, and having just under 21,000 base HP, it's looking pretty good. Once again, this cooldown goes to a 3-turn from a 5-turn once fully booked. Moving on to the passive of this champion, we have Bramble Shaman. Whenever an enemy under poison debuff attacks an ally under a shield buff, instantly activates 1 poison debuff on that enemy. Also instantly activates continuous heal buff on the attacked ally. So like this a lot, it's not just damage, but it's also giving you an additional layer of survivability. Really, really cool. The next champion on our list is going to be a Force Affinity legendary. Always happy to see a Force Affinity. We have Greenwarden Ruarc. Defense based, just under 20,000 base HP, just under 2 points below 1,500 base defense, 102 speed. Really good base stats straight off the back here. First, we have our A1 Sword of the Glades, attacks one enemy, transfers all debuffs from this champion to the target, heals this champion by 5% of their max HP for each debuff transferred. So this can be pretty strong for sure based on the rest of the kit. Next, we have an A2 Rust Consume, attacks all enemies, has an 80% up to 100% chance when fully booked of applying that AoE attack down, also steals all continuous heal buffs from each enemies. Kind of niche, this effect cannot be resisted. Doesn't really matter that it can't be resisted because we have to stack accuracy for decreased attack. Next, we have an A3 Call of the Wild, places a taunt buff, which is a brand new buff added to the game. I'm going to make a separate video on that, fully explaining what that does in much greater detail than I could in a video like this, so we don't make it too long. A 60% increased defense buff and a 25% strengthen buff on this champion for 2 turns. This goes down to a 4-turn cooldown once fully booked. Finally, a passive here, Knight of Vines, 1-turn baseline cooldown down to a 0-turn cooldown if it is fully booked. Whenever an ally loses 10% or more of their max HP from a single hit, places a shield buff on that ally for 2 turns equal to 10% of their max HP. This would be, of course, much stronger if it was this guy's max HP based on his stats here, but it's going to be your target, meaning your ally champion target's max HP instead. And finally, we have a defense aura for this champion, increases ally defense in all battles by 30%. Okay, and to top off the legendaries for the Sylvan Watchers, we have Ailil. Now, this champion is looking strong. I'm going to do a separate video showcasing, and one thing to kind of know as we go through these champions here, I'm not showcasing them in content yet because I like it when you guys comment and say it would be really cool to see this champion here, this champion there, because while I've done a decent job in the past of testing champions where I think they would fit best, I always get really good comments during my showcases saying, I wish you would have shown it here, and then you bring up a point that I probably overlooked here. So I'm looking for that on any of these champions. If any of them really stand out strong to you in a specific spot, I will make a video covering that location. So definitely take the time and leave a comment for sure. But with that being said, let's head back to this legendary attack-based Void Legendary. And this is the first Void Legendary of the faction, and boy is it a strong one. 1600 base attack, 105 base speed, crazy combo already. Not the best defense, mediocre at best HP, but let's look at his skills. We have an A1, attacks one enemy, steals all buffs from the target for the first time this champion hits them. With this skill, this effect cannot be resisted. Each subsequent time this attack hits an enemy, no buffs will be stolen. Instead, the damage will be increased by 10% for each buff on the target. So really good trade-off here. A lot of skills use value after effects that only take into account the first hit, but they really did a good job with the subsequent hitting of this champion. Moving on to the A2 Pierce the Carapace. 4-turn cooldown all the way down to a 3-turn cooldown, attacks one enemy, will ignore Strengthen, Stone Skin, increased defense, and ally protection buffs. Wow. We have seen nothing like this. If this attack kills an enemy, fully heals this champion and places a Stone Skin buff on them for 1 turn. Stealing the best, I'm not going to say stealing, applying the best buff in the game to this champion when he can kill another champion. Crazy. It's just crazy. And yes, it is a 3-turn cooldown, but it's ignoring every major buff you could possibly think of to help a champion live through a single target ability. And I don't know, this is just going to blow my mind here. Next, we have an A3 Chill Wind of Autumn here. Attacks all enemies before attacking, removes any increased defense buff on each target and replaces it with the defense down for 2 turns. Also removes Strengthen, replacing it with Weaken for 2 turns. Places block buffs debuff for 1 turn on enemies not under increased defense or strengthen buffs before attacking. The buff removal and debuff placement cannot be resisted. So for the first time since probably Ghostborn, the debuff cannot be resisted actually makes sense. They're not overloading a champion with a required accuracy skill. We simply have an ignore on the A2, and for the A1 we have a similar ability that cannot be resisted, and it stays true and in line with the A3 here, so very good. Let's hopefully it sticks for the passive here. Force of Nature increases this champion's HP by 2000, defense by 100 for every 1000 attack they have. So hey, the first thing I said that I noticed that was kind of off about this champion is fixed with the passive. So stacking attack also increases the HP and defense for this champion, fills this champion's turn meter by 10% whenever they receive a buff. Also huge, so this guy's going to be a force to be reckoned with, no pun intended, on the passive here. I'm excited to do a full showcase on this champion specifically because, to my knowledge, this is the first champion that really targets endgame players in forever. I cannot name another champion recently being 6 months, that was a exclusive endgame champion. Not to say you cannot use him in other places, but most champions are just unusable in the endgame. Very few break through the meta and become game changing, but this guy for sure, especially in an arena aspect, he's going to be strong. So he's going to be very, very strong. Moving on to the first epic of the day, we have Cormac the Highpeak. Another Magic Affinity champion, 1500 attack, 94 speed, kind of on the lower end, 14,000 base HP, defense 826, so a lot of low stats. Let's see what his skill is. Drover A1 attacks one enemy, has a 40% chance of placing decreased speed debuff for 2 turns. Moving on to the A2, Highpeak's Reach, attacks one enemy before attacking, has a 75% chance of placing defense down debuff on the target for 2 turns. Single target ability, nothing too crazy here. Next we have an A3, increases accuracy and increases crit rate for 3 turns, then grants an extra turn. Once again, nothing too crazy here. Aura increases ally attack in all battles by 20%. So this is kind of one of the, despite how cool he looks, I would say his kit is rather lacking for this first epic that we are showcasing here today. The next champion we have is easily one of my favorite looking champions, Duedan the Runic. We have a Force Affinity, HP based epic here, 19,000, just under 20,000 base HP, 97 speed, not the worst, 1156 base defense, but my god, look at how cool this champion looks. I want him. I want to build him. I'll make him work. Let's go over the kit. Hopefully it's something that I can make work in anywhere. So A1, Lodestone Claw, attacks one enemy, has a 50% chance of removing 1 random debuff from all allies. Not the worst. It could have been 1 random buff from the enemy, which we've seen a billion times. Not that good. The fact that it has a 50% up to a 60% chance of removing 1 random debuff from all allies, not the worst for sure. Is that Copium? Perhaps. Protector Effigy. This is a 4-turn cooldown, attacks all enemies, places a shield buff on all allies for 2 turns, equal to 15% of this champion's max HP, increases the duration of all buffs on all allies by 1 turn. Love that second part. We don't have enough champions that do that. I like it already. Increasing the durations of buffs is something that's been lacking in this game, not as much as a counterattack, granted, but definitely lacking as far as the champion choices we do have. Adding another one with this new faction was a brilliant move by Plarium. Next we have an A3, Lure of Fools, places a taunt buff, that new buff I was talking about, on this champion for 1 turn. Also places a 25% strengthen and a counterattack buff on this champion for 2 turns. Really cool synergy going on right here. And finally we have an Aura, increases ally defense in all battles by 20%. So all in all, simply based off of his A2 and the fact that he has the new taunt buff for this champion, he's looking like a really good champion, mostly because of the A2, let's be real here. But his looks, like I said, fantastic. The next champion is going to be another force-based epic champion, Mistrider Daithi here. So as far as his base stats, speed 97, not too good, not too bad. HP, attack and defense, all on the lower end for sure. A1, Briar Arrows, attacks 1 enemy, has a 50% chance of removing 1 random buff from the target, also having a 10% chance of granting this champion an extra turn. Kind of like Rotos, but nothing's really like Rotos, is it? Moving on to the next skill here, A2, Squall of Shafts, attacks all enemies, has a 75% chance of placing decreased defense for 2 turns, grants an extra turn if a 60% debuff is placed on all enemies by this skill. This is kind of a cool idea here, but once again it kind of showcases the fact that 3% resistance that's inherently built into the game is a very flawed and bad system. So it's kind of rewarding you for not getting hit by that 3%, which I'm not a huge fan of. Moving on to the A3, Hunt the Miss, placing a 50% increased attack, 50% increase accuracy buff on this champion for 3 turns, then grants an extra turn here. So overall, not the worst kit. We do have increased accuracy in all battles by 40, but I don't know. I'm not going to complain too much about the A2, but I do believe it is rewarding in the wrong sense for this game for sure. The next champion we have is going to be our first Spirit Affinity Epic Champion, Myciliac Preist Ornn. Shout out to my League of Legends players. Not quite the same Ornn. How does he look? Really cool. Love the look of this guy. Not your typical like Ranger green elf, but they did some work on him. I mean, we all know how the art team and design team is for this game. Let's look at the base stats. 20,000 HP. Stands out straight out the gate here. 95 base speed, a little bit lower than I'd like. Just under 1200 defense, respectable for sure. Let's look at his kit here. Attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 30% chance of placing a 5% poison for 2 turns. This goes up to a 40% chance once fully booked. Moving on to the A2, Erupting Growth, attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 75% chance up to 100 once fully booked of instantly activating 5% poison debuff on the target. This goes to a 3-turn cooldown once fully booked, and it is based on HP, which aligns with his base stats for sure. I definitely like this, but it can be problematic for any content like the clan boss because you don't want to be instantly activating poisons by any means. Moving on to the A3, the Colony Expands. Interesting name for sure. Attacks all enemies, has a 75% chance up to 100 once booked of placing 2 5% poison debuffs and a 25% poison sensitivity debuff for 2 turns. Heals this champion by 5% of their max HP for each poison debuff placed by this skill. This goes to a 3-turn cooldown, so maybe we can see some dungeon soloing with this champion. He is green affinity, so it's a good affinity for the dragon. He does have the ability to instantly detonate. I'm curious about this champion for sure. Let's move on to the passive here and see what else he can offer. And it's looking good. Whenever we have Mycelium. We have Mycelium for the passive. Whenever a poison debuff is activated on an enemy, increases this champion's HP, defense by 5%, stacks up to 25%, resets each round. So maybe, just maybe, I'll test that out first. As far as soloing, dragon, ice golem could be the strat for sure. Base stats pretty good. The speed is going to be harder to kind of finesse with gear, but his kit does look pretty damn promising. Alright, the next champion is another Spirit Affinity Ruella attack-based epic champion. 1300 attack, nothing crazy. 112 base speed, something interesting to look at for sure. That's very high for an epic champion here. Moving on to the A1, Harassment Volley, attacks one enemy 3 times. Each critical hit has an 80% chance up to 100 of stealing 5% of the target's turn meter. Is this good enough to be used for Fire Knight? Only time will tell. Moving on to the A2, attacks one enemy 3 times. Okay, Fire Knight. Each has a 50% chance of placing defense down, weaken, and decrease speed. Okay, Plarium, I see you. This goes up to a 50, 60, 70% chance overall on all 3 defense down, weaken, and decrease speed abilities. Let's look at the A3 here. Fills the turn meter of all allies by 20% and places a 30% crit rate buff on all allies for 2 turns. So you would probably turn this skill off if you did want to use him for the Fire Knight for sure. Increases ally accuracy in dungeons by 40. So she could be the answer. She really could be the answer too. Who can we replace Allure with in the Fire Knight? The final champion we have is a Void, the only Void epic we have here. Defense-based White Dryad Nia. Looks simple but good. I do think simple but good. I do like the incredible detail, of course, to the face and the armor, but nothing too flashy, and I think they made it work for sure. Base stats, 98 base speed, not the worst. 20,000 HP, fantastic. Just under 1300 defense, average for sure. Let's take a look at the skills. A1, Strangling Plant, attacks all enemies, has a 30% chance of placing a 30% decreased speed debuff for 2 turns. This goes up to a 50% chance, so an AoE A1 can be very strong for sure, as we all know. Then we have Riotous Revival here, removes all debuffs from a target ally, then heals them by 40% of their HP. If the target of this skill is not this champion, decrease the cooldown of all the target skills by 2%. So pretty much like a worse Renegade, a worse Kymar because it is a single target ability, but the heal is something we're going to come back to and look at for sure, because the heal is increased quite a bit on the extra skill points here, and it goes down to a 3-turn cooldown. Moving on to Bark Flesh, the A3 6-turn cooldown, all the way down to a 3-turn cooldown, which is very strong, placing a 50% ally protection buff on all allies except this champion, and then places a 15% strengthen buff on all allies for 2 turns. So it is the weaker strengthen buff. Not really sure why they elected to do that. But let's move on to the passive. Whenever this champion is healed, heals each ally except this champion by 20% of that heal, making gear sets that heal very important because there is no cooldown on this, and it also highlights this skill here. If they do use this skill on this champion, it's a 40% heal, which you can scale based on this champion's max health, which of course, as we stated, 20,000 base HP is very high. And then of that 40%, so let's say it has 100,000 health, we heal for 40,000, then we get 20% of that 40,000 directly onto every single champion. And of course, this can be further amplified by gear sets, masteries, all of that good stuff. So definitely can be a promising healer with something like an ally protection for sure. Alright guys, so that is going to conclude the Sylvan Watcher showcase of the legendaries and epic champions here. Give me your feedback. Which champions are you most excited about? Where do you want to see these champions tested? A few things that I mentioned in the video already and some that I didn't really stuck out to me as far as where we can test these champions. But like I said, I need your feedback specifically before I go into this, because you guys always have great ideas that I find out after the fact and I've already made the video and it's like, well, what's the point? So definitely leave a comment, give me your feedback. If you enjoy this content, smash that like button, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and I will see you all in my next upload.